Welcome back, everybody, to another Memory Light read-through by your one and only host, Calculator Ferret. And this segment, we start Chapter 2. So we're steadily moving on. After it took us like 6 segments to get to the prologue, we'll finally get to that Chapter 2. Of course, later on, we're going to have some heck of a long chapters. Like I know for certain that the last battle chapter is like 200 pages plus. So that'll take us plenty of segments to finish. But hey, for now, we're on chapter 2, so let's get right into this. Pevara did her very best to pretend that she was not terrified. If these Ashermen had known her, they'd have realized that sitting still and quiet was not her natural state. She retreated to basic Ace Day training, appearing in control when she felt anything but. She forced herself to rise. Canlear and Emerin had withdrawn to visit the Two River lads and make sure they were going about in pairs. That left only her and Androl again. He quietly tinkered with his leather straps as the rain continued outside. He used 2 needles at once to stitch, crossing the holes on either side. The man had the concentration of a master craftsman. Pevara strolled over, causing him to look up sharply when she drew close. She smothered a smile. She might not look it, but she could move quietly when necessary. She stared out of the window. The rain had grown worse, splashing curtains of water against the glass. After so many weeks of looking as if it would storm any moment, it finally comes. These clouds had to open eventually, Androl said. The rain doesn't feel natural, she said, hands clasped behind her. She could feel the coldness through the glass. It doesn't ebb and flow, just the same steady torrent, a great deal of lightning, but very little thunder. You think it's one of those? Androl asked. He didn't need to say what those meant. Earlier in the week, common people in the tower, none of the Ashermen, had begun bursting into flame. Just flame, inexplicably. They'd lost some 40 people. Many still blamed the rogue Ashermen, though the men had sworn nobody had been channeling nearby. She shook her head, watching a group of people trudge past on the muddy street outside. She had been one of those at first, who had called the deaths the work of an Asherman gone mad. Now she accepted these events, and other oddities, as something far worse. The world was unraveling. She needed to be strong. Pevara herself had devised the plan of bringing women here to bond these men, though Tarna had suggested it. She couldn't let them discover how disturbing she found it to be trapped in here, facing down enemies who could force a person to the shadow. Her only allies were men. Her only allies men who, only months ago, she would have pursued with diligence and gentled without remorse. She sat down on the stool Emerin had used earlier. I would like to discuss this plan you've been developing. I'm not sure I've actually developed one yet, Ace Day. I might be able to offer some suggestions. I wouldn't say no to hearing them, Androl said, though he narrowed his eyes. What's wrong? She asked. Those people outside. I don't recognize them, and... She looked back out the window. The only light came from buildings, shining an occasional red-orange glow into the drenched night. The passerby still moved very slowly down the street, in and out of the light of windows. Their clothing isn't wet, Androl whispered. With a chill, Pevara realized he was right. The man at the front walked with a wide-brimmed, drooping hat in his head, but it didn't break the rain or stream water. His rustic clothes were untouched by the downpour, and the dress of the women beside him weren't blowing at all in the wind. Now Pevara saw that one of the younger men was holding his hand behind him, as if pulling the reins of a pack animal. but there was no animal there. Pevara and Andrew watched in silence until the figures passed too far into the night to be seen. Visions of the dead were growing increasingly common. You said you had a suggestion? Andrew's voice trembled. Yes. Pevara tore her eyes away from the window. So far, Tame's focus has been on the Aes Sedai. My sisters have all been taken. I am the last. You're offering yourself as bait. They will come for me, she said. It is only a matter of time. Andrew fingered the leather strap and looked pleased with it. We should sneak you out. Is that so? She said, eyebrow raised. I have been elevated to the position of maiden in need of rescue, have I? Very valiant of you. He blushed. Sarcasm from an Aes Sedai? I wouldn't have thought I'd hear that. Pevara laughed. Oh my, Andrew, you really don't know anything about us, do you? Honestly, no. I've avoided your kind for most of my life. Well, considering your innate tendencies, perhaps that was wise. I couldn't channel before, but you suspected. You came here to learn. I was curious, he said. It's something I haven't tried before. It's something I hadn't tried before. Interesting, Pevara thought. Is that what drives you then, leatherworker? What has set you drifting on the winds, from place to place? I suspect, she said, you have never tried jumping off a cliff before. The fact that you haven't done something shouldn't always be a reason to try it. Actually, I have jumped off a cliff. Several of them. She raised an eyebrow at him. The sea folk do it, he explained, off into the ocean. The braver you are, the higher the cliff you choose. And you have changed the topic of the conversation again, Pevara Sedai. You are quite skilled at that. Thank you. The reason, he said, holding up a finger, that I suggested we sneak you out isn't because... The reason, he said, holding up a finger, that I suggested we sneak you out is because this isn't your battle. You shouldn't have to fall here. Is it because you want to hurry an Aes Sedai away, out of meddling in your business? I came to you for help, Andrew said. I don't want to be rid of you. I'll happily use you. However, if you fall here, you do so in a fight that is not your own. That isn't fair. Let me explain something to you, Asherman, Pevara said, leaning in. This is my fight. If the Shadow takes this tower, it'll mean terrible things for the last battle. I have accepted responsibility for you and yours. I will not turn away from it so easily. You've accepted responsibility for us? What does that mean? Perhaps I shouldn't have said that. Still, if they were going to be allies, perhaps he needed to know. The Black Tower needs guidance, she explained. So that's the point of bonding us, Andrew asked, so we can be corralled like stallions to be broken. Don't be a fool. Surely you admit the value of the White Tower's experience. I'm not sure I'd say that, Andrew said. With experience comes a determination to be set in your ways, to avoid new experiences. You Aes Sedai all assume that the way things have been is the only way to do them. Well, the Black Tower will not be subject to you. We can look after ourselves. Oh, and you've done a wonderful job of that so far, haven't you? That was unfair, he said softly. Well, perhaps it was, she admitted. I'm sorry. Your motivations don't surprise me, he said. What you were doing here was obvious to the weakest of soldiers. The question I've had is this. Why, of all women, did the White Tower send red sisters to bond us? Who better? Our entire lives have been dedicated to dealing with men who can channel. Your Ajah is doomed. Is that so? You exist to hunt down men who can channel, he said. To gentle them. See them disposed of. Well, the source is cleansed, so you all say. It is cleansed, Pevara. All things come and pass, and the wheel turns. It was once pure, so it must someday be pure again. It has happened. And the way you look at shadows, Androl, is that a sign of purity? The way that Nalam mutters in unknown languages? Do you think we didn't notice such things? You have two choices as an Ajah, Androl continued. You can either continue to hunt us, ignoring the proof that we offer that the source is cleansed, or you can give up on being Red Ajah. Nonsense. Of all Ajahs, the Red should be your greatest ally. You exist to destroy us. We exist to make certain that men who can channel do not accidentally hurt themselves or those around them. Would you not agree that it is a purpose of the Black Tower as well? I suppose that might be part of it. The only purpose I have been told was that we were to be a weapon for the Dragon Reborn, but keeping good men from hurting themselves without proper training is important as well. Then we can unite in that idea, can we not? I would like to believe that, Pevara, but I've seen the way you and yours look at us. You see us as some stain that needs to be cleansed, or poison to be bottled. Pevara shook her head. If what you say is true, and the source is cleansed, then changes will come, Androl. The Red Ajah and the Ashman will grow together in common purpose over time. I'm willing to work with you here. Contain us? Guide you. Please, trust me. He studied her by the light of the room's many lamps. He did have a sincere face. She could see why the others followed him, though he was the weakest among them. He had a strange mixture of passion and humility. If only he hadn't been one of, well, what he was. I wish I could believe you, Androl said, looking away. You're different from the others, I'll admit. Not like a Red at all. I think you'll find we're more varied than you'd suppose, Pevara said. There isn't one single motive that makes a woman choose the Red. Other than hatred of men. If we hated you, would we have come here looking to bond you? That was a sidestep, in truth. Though Pevara herself did not hate men, many Reds did. At the very least, many regarded men with suspicion. She hoped to change that. Aes Sedai motivations are odd sometimes, Androl said. Everyone knows that. Anyway, different though you are from any of your sisters, I've seen that look in your eyes. He shook his head. I won't believe you're here to help us. No more than I believe that the Aes Sedai who hunted down male channelers really thought they were helping the men. No more than I believe a headsman thinks he's doing a criminal a favor by killing him. Just because a thing needs to be done doesn't make the one doing it a friend, Pevara Sedai. I'm sorry. He turned back to his leather, working by the close light of a lantern on the table. Pevara found her annoyance rising. She'd almost had him. She liked men. She'd often thought warders would be useful. Couldn't the fool recognize a hand extended across the chasm when he saw it? Calm yourself, Pevara, she thought. You won't get anywhere if anger rules you. She needed this man on her side. That will be a saddle, won't it? She said. Yes. You're staggering the stitches. It's my own method, he said. Helps prevent rips from spreading. I think it looks nice, too. Good linen thread, I assume. Waxed? And do you use a single lacing chisel for those holes or a double? I didn't get a good look. He glanced at her, wary. You know leather working? From my uncle, she said. He taught me a few things. Let me work in the shop when I was little. Maybe I've met him. She fell still. For all Androl's comments that she was good at steering conversation, she had blundered this one directly into places she didn't like to go. Well, he asked, where does he live? Back in Kandor. You're Kandori? He asked, surprised. Of course I am. Don't I look it? I just thought I could pick out any accent, he said, pulling a pair of stitches tight. I've been there. Maybe I do know your uncle. He's dead, she said, murdered by dark friends. Androl fell silent. I'm sorry. It's been over 100 years now. I miss my family, but they'd be dead by now even if the dark friends hadn't killed them. Everyone I know back home is dead. My sorrow is deeper then, truly. It is long past, Pevara said. I can remember them with fondness without having the pain intrude. What of your family? Siblings? Nieces? Nephews? A smattering of each group, Androl said. Do you ever see them? He eyed her. You're trying to engage in friendly conversation to prove that you don't feel awkward around me, but I've seen how you ace-day look at people like me. I say you don't find us repulsive. I hardly think what you do should be... Straight answer, Pevara. Very well, fine. Men who can channel do discomfort me. You make me itch all over, and it has only grown worse the longer I've been here, surrounded by you. Androl nodded in satisfaction at having pulled it from her. However, Pevara continued, I feel this way because it has been ingrained in me over decades of life. What you do is terribly unnatural, but you yourselves do not disgust me. You are just a man trying to do your best, and I hardly think that is worthy of disgust. Either way, I am willing to look beyond my inhibitions in the name of common good. That's better than I could have expected, I suppose. He looked back towards his rain-spattered windows. The taint is cleansed. This isn't unnatural any longer. I wish I could just show you, woman. He looked towards her sharply. How does one form one of these circles you mentioned? Well, Pevara said, I've never actually done it with a male channeler force. I did some readings before coming down here, but much of what we have is hearsay. So much has been lost. To start with, you must put yourself on the edge of embracing the source, then open yourself up to me. That is how we establish the link. All right, he said. You're not holding the source, however. It was downright unfair that a man could tell when a woman was holding the one power and when she wasn't. Pevara embraced the source, flooding herself with the sweet nectar that was Sayadar. She reached out to the link of Androl as she would if a woman. That was how one was supposed to begin, according to the records. But it was not the same. Sayadin was a torrent, and what she had read was true. She could do nothing with the flows. It's working. My power is flowing into you. Yes, Pevara said, but when a man and a woman link, the man must be in control. You must take the lead. How? Androl asked. I don't know. I'll try to pass it. You must control the flows. He eyed her, and she prepared herself to pass control to him. Instead, he somehow seized it. She was caught in the tempestuous link, yanked, as if by her hair, right in. The force of it nearly made her teeth rattle, and it felt as if her skin was being pulled off. Pevara closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and did not let herself fight back. She had wanted to try this. It could be useful, but she couldn't help a moment of sheer panic. She was linked with a male channeler, one of the most feared things the land had ever known. Now he had control of her completely. Her power flowed through her, washing over him, and Androl gasped. So much, he said. Light, you're strong. She allowed herself a smile. The link brought with it a storm of awareness. She could feel Androl's emotions. He was as fearful as she was. He was also solid. She'd imagined that being linked to him would be terrible because of his madness, but she sensed none of it. But Sayadin, that liquid fire that he wrestled with, like a serpent that was trying to consume him. She pulled back. Was it tainted? She wasn't certain she could tell. Sayadin was so different, so alien. While reports from the earlier days fragmented, spoke of the taint like an oil slick upon a river. Well, she could feel a river, more of a stream, really. It appeared that Androl had been honest with her, and wasn't very powerful. She could not sense any taint, but then again, she did not know what to look for. I wonder, Androl said, I wonder if I can make gateways to this power. Gateways don't work in the Black Tower anymore. I know, he said, but I keep feeling that they're just beyond my fingertips. Pevara opened her eyes, looking at him. She could feel his honesty within the circle, but creating a gateway required a lot of the one power, at least for a woman. Androl would have to be orders of magnitude too weak for their weave. Could it require a different level of strength for a man? He reached out a hand, using her power somehow, mixed of his own. She could feel him pulling the one power through her. Pevara tried to maintain her composure, but she did not like him having control. She could do nothing. Androl, she said, release me. It's wonderful, he whispered, eyes unfocused as he stood up. Is this what it feels like to be one of the others? Those with strength and the power? He drew more of the hair power and used it. Objects in the room began to rise into the air. Androl! Panic. It was the panic she'd felt after hearing that her parents were dead. She hadn't known this sense of horror in over 100 years, not since taking the test for her shawl. He had control over channeling. Absolute control. She began to gasp, trying to reach for him. She could not use Sidar without him releasing it back to her, but he could use it against her. Images of him using her own strength to tie her in air ran through her mind. She could not end the link. Only he could. He noticed suddenly, and his eyes widened. The circle vanished like a wink of the eye, and her power was her own again. Without thinking, she lashed out. This would not happen again. She would have the control. The weave sprung from her before she knew what she was doing. Androl fell to his knees, hands sweeping across his table as he threw his head back, brushing tools and scraps of leather to the floor. He gasped. What have you done? Tame said we could pick any of you, Pevara muttered as she realized what she had done. She'd bonded him. The reverse, after a fashion, of what he'd done to her. She tried to calm her thundering heart. An awareness of him blossomed in the back of her mind, like what they'd known in the circle, but somehow more personal, intimate. Tame is a monster, Androl growled. You know that. You take his word in what you can do, and you can do it without my permission? Androl clenched his jaw, and Pevara immediately felt something. Something alien. Something strange. It felt like looking at herself, feeling her emotions circle back on her endlessly. Her self melded with his for a seeming eternity. She knew what it was like to be him, think his thoughts. She saw his life in a blink of an eye, was absorbed by his memories. She gasped and fell to her knees in front of him. It faded. Not completely, but it faded. It felt like swimming 100 leagues through boiling water, and only now emerging, having forgotten what it was like to have normal sensations. Light, she whispered. What was that? He lay on his back. When had he fallen? He blinked, looking up at the ceiling. I saw one of the others do it. Some of the Ashermen bond their wives. You bonded me? She said, horrified. He groaned, rolling over. You did it to me first. She realized with horror that she could still feel his emotions, his self. She could even understand some of what he was thinking. Not the actual thoughts, but some impressions of them. He was confused, worried, and curious. He was curious about the new experience. Ah, foolish man! She'd hoped that the two bonds would have somehow canceled one another out. They did not. We need to stop this, she said. I'll release you. I vow. Just release me. I don't know how, he said, standing up and breathing in deeply. I'm sorry. He was telling the truth. That circle's a bad idea, she said. He offered a hand. He offered a hand to help her to her feet. She stood on her own without accepting it. I believe it was your bad idea before it was mine. So it was, she admitted. It isn't my first one, but it might be one of my worst. She sat down. We need a way to think through this. Find a way to... The door to his shop slammed open. Androl spun, and Pevara embraced the source. Androl had grabbed his stitching drover in one hand like a weapon. He'd also seized the one power. She could sense that molten force within him, weak because of his lack of talent, like a single small jet of magma, but still burning and hot. She could feel his awe. So it was the same for him as it was for her. Holding the one power felt like opening your eyes for the first time, the world coming to life. Fortunately, neither weapon nor the one power was needed. Young Evan stood in the doorway, raindrop dribbling down the sides of his face. He shut the door and hurried to Androl's workbench. Androl, He froze, seeing Pevara. Evan, Androl said. You're alone? I left in the lamb to watch, he said, breathing in and out. It was important, Androl. We are never to be alone, Evan, Androl said. Never. Always in pairs, no matter the emergency. I know, Evan said. I'm sorry, it's just the news, Androl. He glanced at Pevara. Speak, Androl said. Wellen and his Ace Day are back, Ewan said. I think he said no. Evan said. Pevara could feel Andrew's sudden tension. Is he one of us still? Evan shook his head, sick. He's one of them. Probably generous a day is too. I don't know her well enough to tell for sure. Welland, though, his eyes aren't his any longer, and he now serves tame. Andrew groaned. Welland had been with Logain. Andrew and the others had been holding to the hope that although Mezar had been turned, Logain and Welland were still free. Logain? Andrew whispered. He isn't here, Evan said. But Andrew, Welland says Logain will come back soon, and that he's met with Tame, and they have reconciled their differences. Welland is promising that Logain will come tomorrow to prove it. Andrew, that's it. We have to admit it now. They have him. Pevara could feel Andrew's agreement, and his horror. It mirrored her own. Aviendha moved through the darkened camp silently. So many groups. There had to be at least 100,000 people gathered here at the field of Marilor, all waiting, like a breath taken in and held before a giant leap. The Ale saw her, but she did not approach them. The Wetlanders didn't notice her, save for a warder who spied her as she skirted the Aes Sedai camp. That camp was a place of motion and activity. Something had happened, though she caught only fragments. A Trolloc attack somewhere? She listened enough to determine that the attack was in Andor, in the city of Camelin. There was word that Trollocs would leave the city and rampage across the land. She needed to know more. Will the spears be danced tonight? Perhaps Elaine would share news of her. Aviendha moved silently out of the Aes Sedai camp. Stepping softly in these wetlands with their lush plants presented different challenges than the threefold land itself. There the dry land was often dusty, which could muffle footsteps. Here a dry twig could inexplicably be buried beneath wet grass. She tried not to think about how dead that grass seemed. Once she'd have considered these browns lush. Now she knew these wetland plants should not look so wan and hollow. Hollow plants. What was she thinking? She shook her head and crept through the shadows out of the Aes Sedai camp. She'd briefly contemplated sneaking back to surprise that warder. He'd been hiding in a moss-worn cleft in the rubble of an old fallen building and watching the Aes Sedai perimeter, but discarded the idea. She wanted to go to the Elaine and ask for details on the attack. Aviendha approached another busy camp, ducked beneath the leafless branches of a tree. She didn't know what type, but its limbs spread wide and high, and slipped inside this guard perimeter. A pair of Wetlanders in white and red stood on watch near a fire. They didn't come close to spotting her, though they did jump up and level polearms towards a thicket a good 30 feet away when an animal rushed in it. Aviendha shook her head and passed them. Forward. She needed to keep moving forward. What to do about Randall Thor? What were his plans for tomorrow? There were other questions she wanted to ask Elaine. The Ale needed a purpose once Randall Thor finished with them. That was clear from the visions. She had to find a way to give this to them. Perhaps they should return to the threefold land. But no. It tore her heart, but she had to admit that if the Ale did so, they would be going to their graves. Their death as a people would not be immediate, but it would come. The changing world of new devices and new ways of fighting would overtake the Ale, and the Sietchen would never leave them alone. Not with women who could channel, not with armies full of spears that could at any time invade. A patrol approached. Aviendha drew some fallen brown undergrowth over herself for camouflage, then lay down flat beside a dead shrub and remained perfectly still. The guards walked 2 headspans from her. We should attack the Sietchen now, she thought. In my vision, the Ale waited nearly a generation to attack, and that lets the Sietchen strengthen their position. The Ale already spoke of the Sietchen in the confrontation that must inevitably come. The Sietchen would force it, everyone whispered. Except in her visions, years had passed with the Sietchen failing to attack. Why? What could possibly have held them back? Aviendha rose and crept across to the pathway the guards had taken. She took out her knife and rammed it down to the ground. She left it there, right beside a lantern on a pole, clearly visible even to Wetlander eyes. Then she slipped back into the night, hiding near the back of the large tent that was her goal. She crouched low and practiced her silent breathing, using the rhythm to calm herself. There were hushed, anxious voices inside the tent. Aviendha did her best not to pay attention to what they were saying. It wouldn't be proper to eavesdrop. As the patrol passed again, she stood up. When they cried out, having found her dagger, she slipped around to the front of the tent. There, avoiding the attention of guards distracted by the commotion, she lifted the flap and stepped inside the tent behind them. Some people sat at a table on the far side of the very large tent, huddled around a lamp. They were so busy with their conversation that they did not see her, so she settled down near some cushions to wait. It was very hard not to listen in, now that she was so close. "Must send our forces back!" one man barked. "The fall of the capital is a symbol, Your Majesty, a symbol! We cannot let Camelin go, or the entire nation will collapse into panic." "Oh, yeah. You underestimate the strength of the Andorian people," said Elaine. She stood very much in control, very strong, her gold hair practically glowing in the lamplight. Several of her battle commanders stood behind her, lending authority and a sense of stability to the meeting. Aviendha was pleased to see the fire in her first sister's eyes. "I have been to Camelin, Lord Lear," Elaine continued, "and I have left a small force of soldiers there to watch and give trolling if the Trollocs leave the city. Our spies will use gateways to sneak through the city and find where the remaining Trollocs are herding captives, and then we can mount rescue operations if the Trollocs continue to hold the city." "But the city itself," Lord Lear said. "Camelin is lost, Lear," Lady Dylene snapped. "We'd be fools to try to mount any kind of assault now." Elaine nodded. I have held conference with the other high seats, and they agree with my assessment. For now, the refugees who escaped are safe. I sent them on along towards Whitebridge with guards. If there are people alive within, we will try to rescue them with gateways, but I will not commit my forces to an all-out attack on Camelin's walls." "But taking the city again would be fruitless," Elaine said, voice hard. "I know full well the damage that can be done to an army assaulting those walls. Andor will not collapse because of the loss of one city, no matter how important a city." Her face is a mask. Her voice is cold as good steel. "The Trollocs will eventually leave the city," Elaine continued. "They gain nothing by holding it. They will starve themselves out, if nothing else. Once they leave, we can fight them, and on far fairer ground. If you wish, Lord Lear, you may visit the city yourself and see that what I say is true. The soldiers there could use the inspiration of a high seat." Lear frowned, but nodded. "I think I will." "Then go, knowing my plan. We will begin sending in scouts before the light is through, trying to find pens of civilization to save, and Aviendha, what in the name of a bloody goat's left stone are you doing?" Aviendha looked up from trimming her fingernails with her second knife. Bloody goat's left stone? That was a new one. Elaine always knew the most interesting curses. The three heists at the tables jumped up, scrambling, throwing down chairs and reaching for swords. Elaine sat in her place, eyes and mouth wide. "It is a bad habit," Aviendha admitted, slipping her knife back into her boot. "My nails were growing long, but I should not have done it in your tent, Elaine. I am sorry. I hope I did not offend." "I'm not talking about your flaming nails, Aviendha," Elaine said. When did you arrive? Why didn't the guards announce you?" "They didn't see me," Aviendha said. "I didn't wish to make a fuss, and wetlanders can be so touchy. I thought they might turn me away now that you were queen." She smiled as she said the last part. Elaine had much honor. The way of becoming a leader among the wetlanders was different from proper ways. Things could be so backwards here. But Elaine had handled herself well and obtained her throne. Aviendha couldn't have been more proud of a spear sister who had taken a clan chief, Gaishain. "They didn't," Elaine said. "No, they didn't," Elaine said. Suddenly she was smiling. "You crept through the entire camp to my tent at the center and then slipped inside and sat not but 5 feet from me. And nobody saw. I didn't wish to make a fuss." "You have a strange way of not making a fuss." Elaine's companions did not react with such calm. One of the three, young Lord Pevara, gazed around him with worried eyes, as if searching for more other intruders. "My queen," Lear said, "we must punish this breach in security. I will find the men who are lax in their duty and see that they—" "Peace," Elaine said. "I will speak to my guards and suggest they keep their eyes a little more open. Still, guarding the front of a tent is a silly precaution, and always has been, as someone can just cut their way into the back." "And ruin a good tent?" Aviendha said, lips turning down. "Only if we have blood feud, Elaine." "Lord Lear, you may go inspect the city, from a good distance, if you wish," Elaine said, standing. "If any of the rest of you wish to accompany him, you may. Dyleen, I will see you in the morning." "Very well," the Lord said in turn, then walked away from the tent. Both kept distrustful eyes on Aviendha as they left. Dyleen just shook her head before following them, and Elaine sent her battle commanders out to coordinate scouting of the city. That left Elaine and Aviendha alone in the tent. "Light, Aviendha," Elaine said, embracing her. If the people who want me dead had half of your skill—" "Did I do something wrong?" Aviendha said, "other than sneaking into my tent like an assassin?" "But you are my first sister," Aviendha said. "Should I have asked? But we are not under a roof. Or, among wetlanders, is a tent considered a roof, as in a hold? I'm sorry, Elaine. Do I have toe? You are such an unpredictable people. It's hard to know what will offend you and what will not." Elaine just laughed. "Aviendha, you're a gem. A complete and total gem. Light, but it's good to see your face. I needed a friendly one tonight." "Camlin has fallen?" Aviendha asked. "Near enough," Elaine said, face growing colder. "It was that bloody Waygate. I thought it was safe. I had that thing all but bricked up, with 50 guards at the door and the Advendisora leaves taken and put on the outside." "Someone inside Camlin let them in, then?" "Dark friends," Elaine said. "A dozen members of the guard. We were lucky enough that one man survived the betrayal and found his way out." "Light, I don't know why I should be surprised. If they're in the White Tower, then they're in Andor too. But these were men who had rejected Gabriel, and who seemed loyal. They waited all this time only to betray us now." Aviendha grimaced, but took one of the chairs to join Elaine at the table, rather than staying on the floor. Her first sister preferred sitting that way. Her stomach had swelled at the children she bore. "I sent Burgett with the soldiers to the city to see what could be done," Elaine said. "But we're done what we can for the night. The city watch, the refugees seen to. Light, I wish I could do more. The worst part about becoming queen is not the things you must do, but the things that you cannot." "We will bring the battle to them soon enough," Aviendha said. "We will," Elaine said, eyes smoldering. "I'll bring the fire and fury, repayment in kind for the flames they brought to my people." "I heard you speak to those men of not attacking the city." "No," Elaine said. "I will not bring them the satisfaction of holding my own walls against me. I have given Burgett an order. The Trollocs will eventually abandon Camlin, of this we are sure. Burgett will find a way to hasten that, so we can fight them outside of the city." "Do not let the enemy choose your battleground," Aviendha said with a nod. "A good strategy. And Rand's meeting?" "I will attend," Elaine said. "I must, so it will be done. He had better not give us theatrics and stalling. My people die, my city burns, the world is 2 steps away from the edge of a cliff. I will stay through the afternoon only. After that, I go back to Andor." She hesitated. "Will you come with me?" "Elaine," Aviendha said, "I cannot leave my people. I am a wise one now." "You went to Reuden?" Elaine asked. "Yes," Aviendha said. Then, though it pained her to keep secrets, she could say nothing of her visions there. "Excellent, Elaine began, but this was cut off. "My queen?" the tent guard called from outside. "Messenger for you." "Let them in." The guard opened the flaps for a young guardswoman with a messenger's ribbon on her coat. She performed an ornate bow, one hand removing her hat as the other held out a letter. Elaine took the letter but didn't open it. The messenger retreated. "Perhaps we can still fight together, Aviendha," Elaine said. If I have my way, I will have ale at my side as I reclaim Andor. The Trollocs and Camelin present a serious threat to all of us. Even if I draw their way force out, the Shadow can continue to pour shadow spawn through the gateway. I'm thinking that while my army fights the main body of Trollocs outside of Camelin, I'll have to make the city unhospitable to the shadow spawn somehow. I will send a smaller force through through a gateway to seize the Waygate. If I could gain the aid of ale for that. As she spoke, she embraced the source. Aviendha could see the glow, and absently sliced the letter open, breaking the seal of a ribbon of air. Aviendha raised an eyebrow. Sorry, Elaine said. I've reached the point in my pregnancy where I can channel again reliably, and I keep finding excuses. Do not endanger the babes, Aviendha said. I'm not going to endanger them, Elaine said. You're as bad as Burgett. At least no one has any goat's milk here. Min says... She trailed off, eyes flickering back and forth as she read the letter. Elaine's expression darkened, and Aviendha prepared herself for a shock. Oh, that man, Elaine said. Rand? I think I may strangle him one of these days. Aviendha set her jaw. If he's offended... Elaine turned the letter around. He insists that I return the Camelin to see to my people. He gives a dozen reasons why, going so far as to release me from my obligations to meet with him tomorrow. He should not be insisting on anything from you. Particularly not so forcefully, Elaine said. Lytus is clever. He's obviously trying to bully me into staying. There's a touch of Dies Damar in this. Aviendha hesitated. You seem proud, yet I gather this letter is only one step away from being insulting. I am proud, Elaine said, and angry at him. But proud because he knew to make me angry like that. Light, we'll make a king out of you yet, Rand. Why does he want me at the meeting so badly? Does he think I'll support his side just because of my affection for him? You don't know what his plan is, then? No, it obviously involves all the rulers. But I'll attend even though I'm likely to do so without had any sleep tonight. I am meeting with Burgett and my other commanders in an hour to go over plans for drawing out, then destroying the Trollocs. A fire still burned behind those eyes of hers. Elaine was a warrior, as true as one as Aviendha had ever known. I must go to him, Aviendha said. Tonight? Tonight. The last battle will soon begin. As far as I'm concerned, it started the moment those bloody Trollocs set foot in Camelin, Elaine said. May the light favor us. It is here. Then the day of dying will come, Aviendha said. Many of us will soon wake from this dream. There may not be another night for Rand and myself. I came to you in part to ask you of this. You have my blessing, Elaine said softly. You were my first sister. Have you spent time with Min? Not enough, and under other circumstances, I would remedy that lack immediately. There is no time. Elaine nodded. I do think she feels better about me, Aviendha said. She did me a great honor in helping me understand the last step to becoming a wise one. It may be appropriate to bend some of the customs. We have done well under the circumstances. I would speak to her tonight with you, if there is time. Elaine nodded. I can spare a moment or two between meetings. I'll send for her.